Hello class, and welcome to section 9.5, which is about completing the square. By the end of today's lesson, you will be able to complete the square and use this process to solve quadratics. So in order to complete the square, we need to remember what our perfect square trinomial is. The perfect square trinomial is one that can be broken down with our factoring techniques that we learned in chapter 7. So we've got x squared plus 10x plus 25. We look at the front and we take the square root, and that's x, and we look at the back and we take the square root, and that's 5. Then we look and make sure that the middle term is double that. So x times 5 is 5x, double that is 10x. So this is a perfect square trinomial and would be written out as x plus 5 squared is equal to 0. So we're trying to get everything to be able to be broken down in this nice parentheses format. When you are completing the square, your first job is to find the b value and cut that in half. So once you do that, you're going to square that answer, and then you're going to add that result onto the end of your original equation. So, for example, I have x squared plus 6x plus c. So step 1 is going to be to take the b value, which is 6, and cut it in half. So that gives you 3. Your next step is going to be to square that result. So 3 squared is 9. So your completed square equation then is going to be x squared plus 6x plus 9. So we have now made that a perfect square trinomial, which means the square has been completed. Go ahead and try this one on your own. Cutting it in half, we get -4. Squaring -4 is 16, so we add 16 onto the end to get x squared minus 8x plus 16. Now, in order to use this to actually solve the problem, you're going to go ahead and make sure that the x's are on one side of the equation. So the x squared and the bx are on one side, and that c value is off on the other side. You're going to complete the square and add that value to both sides of your equation. Then you're going to factor, square root, and solve both cases for x. So what is this going to look like? Step 1, make sure x squared and x are on the same side. That's all good. It checks out, and it's just set equal to a number. So off to the side now, we're going to use that complete the square process. So our b value is 12. Cut that in half. That's going to get us 6. So then we do 6 squared, and that is 36. So then our next step, step 2, is going to be to add this answer to both sides. So I'm going to do x squared plus 12x plus 36 is equal to 0 plus 36. So now we're going to factor and simplify this expression. So what that means is because it is a perfect square trinomial, you can break it down into x plus 6. So we have a plus, so it's a plus. We have that half value, so that's 6. And then simplify 0 plus 36 is going to be 36. Now in order to solve this equation, we need to get rid of that squared. We know that the opposite of squared is square root. So I'm going to square root both sides, and that's going to give me 2 possible cases to solve now. The first one is x plus 6 is equal to the positive square root, which is 6. And the second case is x plus 6 is going to equal the negative square root, which is -6. Now you solve both of your equations. So we're going to subtract 6. And our first answer is going to be x is equal to 0. And then when we subtract the second one, I'm going to get x is equal to -12. So again, start by completing the square, add the answer to both sides, factor, square root, and solve. Go ahead and try this one on your own. So cut it in half is 3, squared is 9, add 9 to both sides, take the square root, solve, you're going to get 0 and negative 6. So what happens when our x's are not by themselves? Your first step is going to be to get rid of this 3 because it doesn't have an x. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides of the equation, and that's going to give me x squared minus 14x is equal to 5. Then again, we need to complete that square process off to the side. So we cut negative 14 in half, and we get negative 7. Negative 7 squared is 49. So I'm going to go ahead and add 49 to both sides of this equation. So it looks like this. Then I need to do my factor and simplify. What that means in this case is I'm going to take, and I've got x, and then we have that half value, which is negative 7 squared is equal to, and then we've got 5 plus 49, which is going to be 54. Then we need to square root both sides of this equation. So when you do that, you're going to get x minus 7, and then the square root of 54, which you're going to round to 2 decimal places. So we've got 7.3, and then it's 4/8, so that's going to round up to 5. And then you've got your negative version of that answer. So you're going to have x minus 7 is equal to negative 7.35. And then you're going to go ahead and finish solving. For both scenarios, you're going to add 7 to both sides of the equation. And when you do that, for the first one, you're going to get x is equal to 14.35. And for the second one, 14.35. And for our second answer, we are going to get x is equal to negative 0.35. So again, same process. The only bonus step here is to make sure that that initial value that you had, so that 3 that didn't have an x, has gotten moved to the other side of the equation to start. Go ahead and try this one on your own. So we start by subtracting the 12, cut that 6 in half, that's negative 3, squared is 9, add it to both sides is going to get you x minus 3 squared equals 16, square root, solve the equations, you get 7 and negative 1. Last thing we're going to talk about is what happens if there is something other than x squared in the front. So if x squared is not by itself in the front, there is one more bonus step that you have to do. And you have to start solving the problem by dividing everything by that value. So 0.1 divided by 0.1 is going to give you 1. So we have just x squared. Then you have 2.4 divided by 0.1, which is going to give you 24x. Then you have 25 divided by 0.1, which is going to be 250. And then you have 430 divided by 0.1, which is going to give you 4,300. So if there's something in front of x squared, you need to get rid of that first by dividing everything by that value. Then we can keep going. We need to get our x's alone, so I'm going to subtract 250 from both sides of the equation. When I do that, I get x squared plus 24x is equal to 4,050. Then off to the side, I need to complete my square. So cutting 24 in half, I get 12. Squaring that is 144. So I'm going to add 144 to both sides of my equation so that it looks like this. Then I'm going to go ahead and break down and simplify my expression. And that's going to give me, when I write it in our parentheses form now, x plus 12, which was that half value, squared is equal to 4,194. Then we need to square root both sides of that equation. And when I do that, I am going to get x plus 12 is equal to 64.7, and then it's 6,1, so I'm going to leave it at 7,6. And then we have x plus 12 is equal to negative 64.76. And then to finish up this problem, I need to subtract 12 from the first one. So when I do that, I'm going to get an answer of x is equal to 52.76. And then when I subtract 12 on the second one, I'm going to get an answer of x is equal to negative 76.76. Go ahead and try this one on your own. Remember, the first thing you need to do is divide everything by 3. Then you cut 2 in half and get 1. 1 squared is 1, so you add 1 to both sides. Then you simplify, square root, and solve for your answer of 1.24 and negative 3.24. Last thing I want to talk about here, again, we have something in front, so I'm going to start by dividing everything, including the answer, by that value. So I've got x squared minus 4x plus, when I divide by 2, that's going to be plus 9 is equal to 0. Then I need to get rid of that 9 on both sides. So I'm going to subtract 9 so I can get my x's isolated. So I've got x squared minus 4x is equal to negative 9. Then off to the side, I've got negative 4. I'm going to cut that in half to get negative 2. Square it gives me positive 4. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides of the equation. And then I'm going to go ahead and simplify that. So when I do that, I've got x minus that half value, which is negative 2, squared is equal to negative 5. If you get to this situation right here, where your answer is equal to a negative, then the solution to this problem is no solution. If the answer after you simplify it is negative, then it is a no solution problem. If you have questions about this or anything else from the lesson, please let me know when you get to class.